Alright, so this is my presentation on the implications of the don't ask, don't tell repeal policy that's occurring in the military right now. So throughout the presentation, if you guys have any questions, make sure you ask. It's okay. I'm not going to be like, hold all your questions till the end. It's not necessary. Alright, so this is my presentation for cultural diversity. I'm Jonathan Wallach, presenter for this particular PowerPoint research paper presentation. Alright, so overall, what Don't Ask, Don't Tell does is it's a policy adapted in 1993 through the Clinton administration. Pretty much it says if you're homosexual, you want to join the military, you can. Just don't tell anybody. Because if you tell somebody, then that's grounds for discharge. Initially when enlisting, people are no longer asked. It's against the rules now. And then you don't tell. And then the third part of it that goes unmentioned quite often is don't harass, which it's kind of a given. You don't harass people anymore in the military. You know, no hazing, anything like that, if you guys know what that is. But, moving on, we'll talk about the history of discrimination against homosexuals in the military, what happened before then, going back to some stories all the way from the foundation of the country. And then benefits that are withheld from homosexuals following the repeal and why that is happening. Ways that we can go ahead and correct those inequalities, things that need to be done, any final thoughts, and then, of course, questions, which you guys are free to ask throughout. All right? All right, give me a moment. All right, what is Don't Ask, Don't Tell? As I discussed a little bit before, it's a policy created in '93 by the Clinton administration. Originally, his campaign promise was to lift the ban on homosexuals serving in the military. But what happened was he encountered a lot of strong resistance from some major opponents, namely one of the senators from Georgia, Democratic senator, by the name of Sam Nunn. And his stance was that it wouldn't be allowed. And as the chair of the Senate Armed Forces Committee, he had a lot of pull and a lot of power. So Clinton's campaign promise went by the wayside, and what ended up happening is this compromise, which is don't ask, don't tell, which still, as we said before, gave homosexuals the ability to enter the military but not stay in the military if they were ousted or denounced as a homosexual. So kind of a hollow win, didn't really give too much power, but in the end it allowed them to serve. So, there we go.
Wait, I have a question.
Sure, what's up?
How come they didn't allow homosexuals to enter the military in the first place? Like, how can they have to keep it a secret?
The only reason they did have to keep it a secret at this point was because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Prior to that, homosexuals have always just been discriminated against in a lot of different cultures and societies. And it's pretty much been on a basis of fear and not understanding. Like, in the early stages of World War II, homosexuality was actually predicted to be a prerequisite to psychopathy. So psychopaths would sometimes start out as homosexuals. That's what they thought. It's a psychological stance on it, and that ended up being actually one of the screenings that they would do before people were allowed to enter the military. Say if somebody was called up for the draft, they call them in, and through their screening, psychological, physical, everything, if they were denoted as a homosexual, then they wouldn't allow them in because they thought they would be insane. So, you know, a lot of things have changed in the time since, well, at least the 40s, and now we understand homosexuality is no longer a mental illness. So it's just been in the history. People have never really accepted it. Throughout some societies, though, they have accepted it. You know, German, or not German, Roman, Greek, that kind of thing. You've seen a lot of acceptance there. In fact, it was commonplace. But, you know, recent European societies and American society, it hasn't been so accepted. In fact, it's been discriminated against like this. But does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
That was a bit long-winded, sorry. Okay. Why is it being repealed? Not only is the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy part of it being repealed, but the entire gays in the military ban is being lifted. And just Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a part of it. What essentially that's doing is it's actually Xing out part of the law, the part of the law that was instated as Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It was kind of a failed attempt overall. because it didn't really lift the gay ban, it just allowed homosexuals into the military, but as soon as they were found out, they were gotten rid of. And you see that in statistics all over the place. But the interesting thing is, around wars and major conflicts, the amount of homosexual service members being discharged every year actually goes down remarkably around the start of a conflict. And when that conflict's being resolved, in the years later, you see that number rise once again. So it's kind of like an unofficial acceptance of homosexuals enlisting and serving in the military when times of conflict arise. So it's the official policy, or it was at the time, that homosexuals aren't allowed, but unofficially, nobody really cared. I mean, you see a lot of different instances of it where people report back from being in a conflict, in a battle, in a foxhole with a homosexual. And they know he's gay. And it's not a problem for them because guess what? They all might die. They all might catch a shell in that hole and they're dead. So what does it really matter? Are they going to throw him out of the hole and let him run for his life? No. That's not the way it works out in the field. So back to that, pretty much what I said before. Instead of allowing them to join freely and continue serving as soon as they're found out they're discharged. So it was really not the best advancement, but a compromise that Clinton did make. The repeal itself, actually, like I said before, it will eliminate part of the United States Code, which is the law, namely Title I, Section 654. And then in the repeal paperwork itself, it refers to another piece of legislature, Title I, Section 7, which is the Defense of Marriage Act, which was also signed into law under the Clinton administration. And what that does is it legally defines what a spouse is and what a marriage is. And it legally defines them as between a man and a woman only. Like, it completely eliminates the propensity for homosexual marriage being legalized in the United States. So by this appealing, referring back to those definitions, it in itself is denying a lot of benefits to homosexual service members, even though the ban will be lifted. And then we'll talk about what those benefits exactly are. Now, the benefits that we're talking about are going to be like the basic allowance for housing, which is an entitlement guaranteed to service members when they either reach a certain rank or they're married. And that depends on the situation they're in. Like E1 to E3, the lowest ranking of the enlisted ranks, they generally don't get it because they're still low, they might get discharged anytime for any reason. But if they are married, they will get it, regardless of what the situation is. Now, if a homosexual couple is trying to get BH, they will not get it because their union is not federally recognized. So the service member doesn't have a dependent, doesn't have a spouse in their eyes, so they can't get it, no matter what. Unless, there are some caveats, unless that service member has either a biological child or a legally adopted child. But say their not spouse, but rather partner, has a biological child. If the service member doesn't legally adopt that child, instead just takes them on as a stepchild without any further kind of legal action, that child will still not get any of the benefits because it's a child gained through a homosexual union, which is not recognized. So it's kind of bogus. Like, it works a lot for all of that. On-base housing, again, if you don't qualify for the basic allowance for housing, you can't live on base in their housing. So it really just restricts them. They end up being treated like a single service member that doesn't have a significant other, either in some of these cases, even just a girlfriend. They don't have anything. So even though they might have, a partner that has 3 children, they don't get anything. And that's kind of what needs to change. Family separation allowance, it's something that's paid to a service member when they're apart from their family or their dependents for 30 or more consecutive days, and they get that monthly. It's like $350 a month for a lot of us. And if somebody goes on deployment and they have a partner back home who's not recognized, they don't get it. So they're missing out on like almost $400 a month. That doesn't seem too right to me, considering I'm on the ship too, along with this guy, and we're doing the same job away from our family, and I get more money than he does. That's not fair. Health insurance, your partner and your non-biological or adopted child will not get health insurance through the military. They won't get dental insurance. They won't be covered under life insurance. My wife is covered under life insurance for $100,000 automatically. So if she dies, whoever she designates will get that money. Just like if I die, she'll get $400,000 because that's my coverage.